Sophia Anderson seemed to have it all: mansions, lavish parties, international trips. But behind every flash, she lived suffocated by the control of her father, the powerful businessman Edward Anderson. Until one heated argument changed everything, and the millionaire's daughter decided to run away, leaving behind only a mysterious note. And this is just the first twist in a story filled with secrets, confrontations, and shocking revelations. So make sure to subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications so you don't miss a single detail of this plot, and tell me in the comments from which city you're watching us. Sophia Anderson lived in a universe of splendor that few could imagine. The family's mansions were the backdrop for parties that brought together influential businessmen, renowned artists, and prestigious politicians. International trips were as common as strolls in the park, and every detail of her life seemed carefully planned to display power and perfection. To the eyes of the world, she was the perfect daughter of Edward Anderson. But behind the glare of the flashes and the curious gazes, there was a weight that suffocated her. Her father, Edward, controlled every step, every decision, every friendship. The luxury that surrounded her was also an invisible wall that kept her from feeling the freedom she so longed for. Even with everything around her, Sophia found herself alone in the silence of the mansion's endless hallways. Dinners at the Anderson household followed an unchanging ritual. The table was impeccable, the dishes served like works of art, and the atmosphere exuded grandeur. Yet alongside the elegance, there was tension. Edward used each gathering to reinforce his authority, imposing rules and expectations that stifled his daughter's spontaneity. At times, Sophia could barely breathe in such a heavy environment. One of those nights, the silence was broken irreversibly. Between a rigid order and an aggressive demand, Sophia could no longer hold back the words she had kept inside for years. The discussion ignited in front of the family with raised voices and frozen stares. The shock was immediate. No one had ever dared to confront Edward in such a way. Sophia, taken by a mix of fear and courage, realized she could no longer live under that yoke. Her heart raced as she spoke, and every sentence was a release. Her father, accustomed to unquestioned obedience, didn't know how to handle such a sudden outburst. What should have been another luxurious formality of a dinner became the stage for a historic rupture. After the argument, the silence that settled over the mansion was even more deafening. Sophia isolated herself in her room, reflecting on everything she had said. The sense of imprisonment grew, as did her desire to break free from that cycle. It was no longer simple rebellion. It was a vital need to breathe outside her father's shadow. That was when the idea of leaving came. An improvised suitcase, a few clothes chosen in haste, and a pen in hand. The hastily written note contained no lengthy explanations but carried a clear message. She could no longer live that way. Sophia left on the table the undeniable proof of her break, something no one could ignore. In the stillness of the night, she crossed the main gate, feeling the weight of her own decisions. The luxury car was left behind, as well as the gilded walls that had kept her prisoner. Sophia took her first steps into the unknown, not knowing what awaited her. And it was in that moment that her life began to change forever. Sophia walked through the city as if it were the first time she had ever stepped on such ordinary ground. The streets had no drivers at her disposal, no discreet bodyguards nearby. The sound of car horns, hurried footsteps, and the smell of street food created a new reality. At every corner, the feeling of vulnerability grew stronger within her. The note left at home had already caused the expected impact. Edward, upon discovering her absence, mobilized journalists, private investigators, and even strategic contacts. The hunt became public, plastering his daughter's face on newspapers and newscasts. With no money in hand, Sophia realized that every passing minute away from the mansion increased the risk of being found. Without resources, she was forced to face details she had never imagined. She searched for coins in her pockets, stared at unreachable shop windows, and felt hunger strike for the very first time. With every sideways glance from strangers, the fear of being recognized grew. The contrast between the luxury she had abandoned and this new routine was cruel and intense. Her stomach growled, and the night's cold began to bite. Sitting on a park bench, Sophia wrapped her arms around herself, trying to calm her anxiety. The designer shoes, once symbols of status, now drew dangerous attention. She needed to blend in, to look ordinary, but how could she shed such obvious marks of her former life? Meanwhile, Edward orchestrated a calculated search. His influence made reporters compete for any scrap of information about the missing heiress. Sensationalist headlines emerged by the hour, turning her escape into a national spectacle. Sophia's absence was no longer just a family drama. It was also a blow to the perfect image Edward had always cultivated. Sophia, on the other hand, desperately searched for a place to hide. She watched lit windows, half-open doors, and simple homes in distant neighborhoods. Fear mixed with hope that someone might take her in. Each step felt heavier, as though the entire city was pushing her into a dead end. The hours dragged on, and the tension became unbearable. Exhausted, Sophia approached a narrow alley, almost invisible to the hurried eye. Her heart raced, her palms sweated, and her breathing grew unsteady. She knew she had to make a quick choice: keep wandering or risk knocking on a random door. It was at that very moment that a humble door creaked open in front of her. The sound echoed softly, revealing the figure of a woman. It was Margaret Maggie Harris, the Andersons' maid. Fate, in all its irony, placed Sophia face to face with someone who knew her world but lived in one entirely different. In Maggie's small house, Sophia experienced a completely new reality. The modest walls, decorated with old photographs and worn furniture, contrasted with the cold, luxurious halls of the Anderson mansion. The smell of homemade food filled the air, bringing a sensation she hadn't known in a long time: comfort. For the first time, she felt she could breathe without being watched. The old spring mattress creaked with every movement, far from the silk sheets she was used to. The improvised room had faded curtains and a small wooden table, but the space felt more genuine than any luxurious suite. Lying down, Sophia gazed at the cracks in the ceiling, as if they were maps of a world she still had to discover. Simplicity unsettled her, but it also drew her in. The neighborhood suspected nothing. There, everyone led ordinary lives, concerned with bills, work, and daily struggles. No one imagined that the quiet young woman staying with Maggie was, in truth, the daughter of millionaire Edward Anderson. That feeling of anonymity, of being just another person, intrigued Sophia. It was as if she had finally found the perfect disguise. Mornings were silent, broken only by the distant sound of roosters and neighbors' conversations on the street. Sophia walked through the small backyard, feeling the dirt under her feet, something unthinkable in the marble mansion where she grew up. The contact with that simple space made her realize there was life beyond glitter and ostentation. It was a discovery as frightening as it was fascinating. Even so, the tension never completely disappeared. With every newspaper left at the door, Sophia feared seeing her face splashed across the headlines. Her heart raced whenever someone looked at her for too long. The contrast between freedom and risk had become part of her new routine, like an invisible thread pulling her between two worlds. One day, a curious neighbor stopped in front of Maggie's gate. In his arms, he carried a bag of fruit, but his eyes lingered on Sophia's face for a few seconds. Time seemed to freeze. She felt her blood turn cold at the thought that she might have been recognized. Her trembling hand masked a quick wave while her heart pounded violently. The moment was brief, but enough to shatter her fragile sense of safety. After the neighbor walked away, Sophia rushed back inside, pressing her back against the closed door. She breathed deeply, trying to convince herself that perhaps it was only her imagination. Still, the doubt remained. How long could she keep her secret hidden? That night, lying on the simple mattress, the feeling of threat lingered like a shadow. The fear of being discovered mixed with the strange sense of belonging to this new world. The life she now lived was unpredictable, yet within it was a spark of truth she had never found in palaces of marble, and what would come next could change everything. Sophia woke up early, hearing the sounds of the modest neighborhood already beginning its routine. Unlike the luxury alarms and flawless service of maids, now it was birdsong and the bustle of the streets that marked her day. She walked into the kitchen, finding Maggie preparing breakfast in a practical, hurried way. For the first time, she closely observed the weight of ordinary life. Sophia's hands, once accustomed only to holding crystal glasses or imported pens, now took on entirely new tasks. She learned to scrub clothes in a makeshift wash basin, feeling the roughness of the soap against her skin. Every movement felt heavy but also revealing. The soap bubbles and the strong smell were reminders that she was living in another reality. Cooking was another challenge. Beside Maggie, Sophia nervously laughed at her mistakes as she tried to chop vegetables with hesitation. The heat of the pan, the rising steam, and the simplicity of the seasonings made her reflect on how she had never noticed the value of something so essential. The small kitchen, lit by a narrow window, became a stage for learning and humility. In the backyard, clothes swayed on the clothesline with the wind. Sophia helped hang them, breathing in the scent of soap mixed with fresh air. The simple, worn, and colorful clothes stood in sharp contrast to the designer dresses that once filled her closets. Here there were no appearances to uphold, only raw, authentic life where every detail carried true weight. Living among the neighbors also brought surprises. On her way to buy bread, she received genuine smiles, spontaneous greetings, and even small gestures of kindness. This unsettled her, for she was used to calculated flattery or interested stares. For the first time, she felt seen as a person, not as the heiress of a fortune. Amid the chores, Sophia noticed Maggie's strength. The woman worked tirelessly, dividing her time between housework and caring for the home. Every detail revealed hidden sacrifices, stories yet untold. Sophia watched in silence, admiring the energy that sustained both the house and the heart within it. The most striking moment, however, came on a rainy afternoon. Sophia saw Maggie take a small wooden box from the cupboard and, with trembling hands, hand over a jewel to the grocer. It was the only jewel she owned, pawned to pay the overdue rent. The sight filled Sophia's eyes with tears, unable to comprehend such generosity. That night, lying on the mattress, Sophia reflected on everything she had witnessed. The weight of gold, parties, and travels seemed ridiculous compared to the value of what she had seen: sacrifice, love, and dignity. Her heart beat stronger, as if every experience was opening an unknown window inside her, but she still had no idea what secrets were yet to come. As days passed, Sophia and Maggie grew closer. The routine, which once seemed like nothing more than a series of heavy chores, turned into moments of conversation and sharing. While washing clothes or preparing meals, confidences surfaced naturally. Sophia, used to silences and protocols, discovered a new way of living together. Maggie, between discreet laughter and firm gazes, began revealing parts of her story. She spoke of sleepless nights, of jobs she had to juggle, of times she sacrificed her own dreams to support James, her son. Every word carried real weight, so different from the shallow stories Sophia was used to hearing in elite circles. James, at 22, emerged as an important piece of this puzzle. He worked hard to help his mother and dreamed of bigger opportunities, though life had taught him caution. His presence was marked by both lightness and strength, and Sophia noticed the difference in a man who sought not status, but dignity. Their conversations often stretched late into the night, under the weak glow of a single lamp in the modest living room. Sophia listened intently to Maggie, like a student before a silent teacher. For the first time, she discovered stories of struggle that were absent from magazines and gala events. With each account, her heart opened to a reality she had never considered. One day, while organizing some belongings in an old drawer, Sophia found a box of letters. Among the yellowed envelopes and worn papers, one name caught her eye: Edward Anderson. The shock was immediate. How could there be a connection between her father and Maggie's past? The mystery became impossible to ignore. Her trembling hands held the paper as she tried to decipher the handwritten lines. The words were vague, but enough to reveal a deeper link. Edward was not just the distant, powerful employer. There was something more, a story hidden behind unspoken silences. Sophia felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Her heart raced as Maggie entered the room. The box was still open, and Sophia could not hide her nervousness. Their eyes met, charged with tension. In that instant, both seemed to know the truth could no longer be avoided. The silence spoke louder than words. That night, Sophia lay awake, unable to sleep. The cracked ceiling loomed above her, reminding her of the discovery she had just made. The weight of the secret pressed down on her, as though Maggie's past and Edward's power were tied together in an impossible knot. And fear grew. How far could this truth change everything? The modest community where Sophia was hiding began to change in atmosphere. Unfamiliar cars drove slowly through the streets, and new faces appeared with watchful eyes. They weren't neighbors. They were men working in Edward's relentless search. The silence that once reigned among the houses was replaced by an air of suspicion and surveillance. Sophia, alongside Maggie, noticed every detail. The sound of footsteps at night, unusual movement in the alleys, even the rise in questions from strangers. Her heart raced, sensing that the invisible wall protecting her was about to collapse. The refuge no longer felt as safe as it had in the early days. Maggie, seasoned in the art of surviving with little, constantly warned Sophia, "Don't say too much, don't expose yourself, stay calm." Each word was a reminder that if the truth were revealed, it would endanger not only the heiress, but everyone around her. The feeling that danger lurked around every corner became unbearable. Meanwhile, Edward intensified his search. He no longer relied solely on the media. Now private detectives roamed the outskirts. His name carried enough power to turn forgotten streets into targets of investigation. The control he wielded over his company now extended to humble neighborhoods, affecting even those who had nothing to do with his daughter. Inside Maggie's house, every sound seemed like a warning. The creak of a door, the cry of a child at play, even the distant wail of sirens caused them to jump. Sophia spent hours staring out the window, trying to predict when the life she had built in anonymity would be torn away. Fear was constant, but there was also a strange determination. James, aware of the tension, grew restless. Though he still didn't know the full truth about Sophia, he sensed something was being hidden. His protective stance intensified as he observed every unusual movement in the neighborhood. Between nervous laughter and awkward silences, he tried to remain calm, but his eyes betrayed his growing suspicion. The height of tension came on a stifling afternoon. The sound of sirens was followed by an urgent atmosphere. A police raid began in the neighborhood. Doors were forced open. Frightened residents were questioned. The heavy sound of boots echoed like thunder on the narrow street. Sophia's entire body trembled as she realized there was nowhere left to run. With her heart pounding, she hid beneath the bed in the modest room. Her sweaty hands shook and her shallow breathing threatened to give her away. The sound of the police drew closer, each step echoing like the ticking of a countdown. Maggie's house, once a refuge, was now the stage of imminent danger. The secret hung by a thread. The tension surrounding Maggie's house seemed to ease even though the threat still lingered. In that cramped, humble space, something new began to grow. Amid daily chores, Sophia and James exchanged glances that lingered a second too long, smiles that slipped out uninvited. It was as if fear itself made room for an unexpected feeling. James, with his simple and straightforward manner, was ever more present. He helped Sophia with housework, cracked jokes to lighten the burden of the situation, and slowly revealed his strong and generous character. His curly hair bounced when he laughed and his eyes radiated trust. Sophia, used to people who only treated her with interest, discovered the lightness of being seen without masks. Their time together became increasingly intense. One afternoon in the backyard, while hanging clothes on the line, a casual conversation turned into a charged silence. The wind stirred the colorful garments and the space between them seemed to shrink. Sophia felt her heart race as she realized it wasn't just gratitude she felt for James. Nights also brought discreet encounters. Sitting in the small living room, sharing the glow of a simple lamp, they spoke of dreams and fears. James spoke of wanting to change the reality of his community, to provide more for his mother, while Sophia listened closely, admiring his determination. Intimacy grew like a flame on low heat. Maggie, ever perceptive, noticed the changes. Sophia's gaze was no longer only filled with fear, but with a longing to belong, and James, even without knowing who she truly was, showed a devotion that went beyond friendship. The atmosphere in the house swung between external tension and internal discoveries no one dared to name. One day, while tidying Sophia's backpack, James found something that shouldn't have been there. Amid hastily folded clothes was an identification card. The name printed on the document was impossible to ignore: Sophia Anderson. The shock overtook him, as if all the pieces of a puzzle had suddenly fallen into place. The silence between them in that moment was deafening. James stared at Sophia with wide eyes while she, pale, searched for words that wouldn't come. The weight of the truth fell over the room like an immovable stone. The bond built on trust and innocence now trembled on the verge of collapse. Sophia's heart pounded, not only from the fear of being exposed, but from the risk of losing the first true connection she had ever built. The revelation stood between them, and there was no turning back. The love that was being born was on a collision course with the truth she had hidden, and what came next could change everything. The humble neighborhood where Sophia sought refuge woke up different that day. Gone was the usual tranquility. Instead, Cameras, reporters, and black cars lined every corner. The community, used to a quiet routine, had now become the stage of a spectacle of surveillance. Edward's siege was tightening, suffocating any chance of anonymity. Sophia watched everything through the narrow window of her room. She saw confused neighbors trying to understand why journalists were filming their modest homes. Her heart sank, sensing that her hiding place was on the verge of collapse. The contrast between her new simple life and the weight of the Anderson name grew unbearable. It was as if her past had invaded a space that was never truly hers. Maggie tried to keep calm. With firm posture, she instructed Sophia to stay hidden and urged silence in every movement. Yet the fear on her face was impossible to mask. She knew that if the truth came out, it wouldn't just be Sophia who suffered, but also those who had opened their doors to protect her. Meanwhile, James paced restlessly through the neighborhood. He saw cameras pointed in every direction, armored cars patrolling, and felt the tension mounting. Still shaken by the discovery of Sophia's true identity, he struggled to process what it meant to protect someone who carried both power and danger. A mix of attraction and suspicion pulsed within him. Elsewhere in the city, Edward oversaw everything closely. With his imposing presence, he directed each move of his team, demanding immediate results. His figure appeared on television, giving interviews and fueling the media. With a firm voice, he called for information about his daughter, all while keeping hidden the secrets that bound him just as tightly. Back in the community, the pressure grew unbearable. The noise of cameras, the relentless flashes, and the curiosity of neighbors created an oppressive atmosphere. Children ran frightened. Residents tried to push back reporters, but the force of the media was overwhelming. In silence, Sophia felt more cornered than ever. Inside Maggie's home, the mood was one of restrained desperation. Every knock at the door, every shadow cast by the window felt like an announcement of the disguise's end. Sophia's shallow breathing betrayed the panic consuming her. Maggie and James exchanged worried looks as if no way out remained. The height of tension arrived when an armored car stopped in front of the house. Its engine roared, headlights glaring against the window. Outside, voices gathered, journalists shouted questions, and the siege finally materialized before their eyes. Sophia, Maggie, and James knew the confrontation was inevitable. The entire community gathered in front of Maggie's house. Curious neighbors, journalists with cameras, and police officers formed a suffocating circle around the small home. The noise of voices blended with the metallic sound of camera flashes, creating an atmosphere of public judgment. The moment of truth was about to arrive. The door burst open violently and Edward Anderson appeared, imposing. Tall, handsome, with dark brown hair streaked with gray and a well-groomed goatee, he entered with firm steps. His presence filled the space like a storm, silencing even the reporters. All eyes turned to him, awaiting the outcome. Sophia, 20 years old with short light brown pixie-cut hair, stood in the middle of the modest living room. Dressed in simple clothes, her tearful eyes reflected both courage and pain. When Edward found her, he didn't just see his missing daughter. He saw a woman ready to confront him. The contrast between his luxury and the simplicity around her was striking. Maggie, 45 years old, a mixed-race woman with hair tied back in a simple bun, stood beside Sophia. Her worn green uniform clashed with Edward's luxurious attire. Her firm, silent posture revealed unconditional support, even knowing the risk of standing exposed before the entire community. Her gaze was not one of fear but of protection. James, 22 years old, mixed race with dark curly hair, stood near the door, like a barrier between Sophia and the outside world. His eyes were fixed on Edward, radiating suspicion and defiance. The young man, still torn between the revelation and his feelings for Sophia, showed courage in refusing to back down. Before everyone, Sophia finally broke the silence. Her firm voice echoed in the room, "You can have everything, but not my freedom." The impact of the phrase reverberated not only through Edward, but through all who watched. It was as if the modest walls of the house had become the stage for a battle greater than father and daughter. Edward's face, once rigid and impassive, began to break. His eyes welled with tears and a restrained sob escaped. That image shocked everyone, revealing a fragility no one expected from the most powerful man in the city. There was something behind his relentless pursuit, something he had never had the courage to reveal. The community, astonished, watched the confrontation as if it were part of a tragedy laid bare before the world. Amid the relentless flashes and the silence hanging inside the room, the scene became something far greater than a simple reunion. Edward's secret began to surface, leaving the sense that the story was far from over. The silence of the community weighed heavier than any scream. Everyone was gathered in front of Maggie's house, their eyes fixed on the confrontation. The tension was almost palpable, as if the air itself were about to break. The clash between father and daughter turned into a public spectacle, but for them it was an intimate reckoning, inevitable and raw. Sophia raised her voice. Her simple posture contrasted with the strength of her words. She accused Edward of treating her like a trophy, of suffocating her with rules and expectations that were never hers. Her voice, firm and emotional, echoed through the neighborhood like a spark capable of igniting hearts. Edward tried to keep control, but his trembling hands and unsteady eyes betrayed the inner battle he fought. For the first time, he was not the self-assured magnate everyone knew, but a man on the brink of losing what he feared most. Around them, the community watched in absolute silence. Maggie stood by Sophia's side, a silent shield. Her gaze revealed admiration for the young woman's courage and mistrust toward the man who now showed vulnerability. The contrast between their worlds lay exposed before everyone. James stood nearby, watching every detail. The tension in his stance revealed that at the slightest sign of danger, he would intervene. But what he witnessed was greater than any physical clash, an emotional duel between father and daughter. His eyes shifted between them, sensing the weight of a decision that was not his to make. Edward's voice finally faltered. He revealed before everyone the fear that consumed him, losing Sophia as he had lost his wife in the past. His confession shattered the ice of the implacable man and exposed a deep pain no one but him carried. A murmur spread through the community, surprised by the fragility of someone who had always seemed unshakable. The atmosphere became unbearable. Sophia, torn between anger and compassion, stood firm. Her tear-filled eyes stared at Edward with the hardness of someone who would no longer accept chains, yet with the compassion of someone who recognized his pain. The silence around them was so deep that the sound of their quickened breaths filled the air. Suddenly, Edward staggered. His body, once upright and imposing, crumbled under the weight of emotional pressure. He fell to the ground in the midst of the crowd, leaving everyone in shock. The untouchable magnate shattered there, exposed like any ordinary man, and the entire neighborhood witnessed his unexpected collapse. Edward's fall marked a turning point. The community, once stunned, now watched a powerful man exposed in his fragility. Sophia, with tear-filled eyes, did not run from the scene. On the contrary, she stepped closer to her father, bent down and with trembling hands helped him rise. There, in the middle of chaos, the first bridge between them was built. Edward no longer carried the authority he once did. His posture, once unshakable, now revealed regret. For the first time, there were no orders or threats, only a man asking his daughter for something he had never known how to give: understanding. The silence around them reinforced the weight of that moment. Sophia made a decision that surprised everyone. She would not return to the world of mansions or flashing lights, but neither would she deny the bond of blood that tied her to her father. With firmness, she declared that she would live her life independently, and the clarity in her voice made it evident that there was no turning back. Maggie watched in silence, her eyes brimming with tears. The woman who had offered shelter now witnessed Sophia's transformation. More than a protector, she had become a pillar and a friend, an indispensable presence for the new chapter about to begin. Her heart swelled with pride. James also remained by her side. His eyes, once filled with suspicion, now reflected pride. The bond with Sophia, born amid uncertainty, had grown stronger, not only marked by affection, but by the certainty that they would walk together through whatever lay ahead. Days passed and a new routine began. Sophia was seen enrolled at a public university, carrying simple books in her backpack and riding the bus like any young woman her age. The luxury of the past was gone, but the sense of freedom gave a new light to her gaze. Edward, in turn, was seen discreetly helping the community. There were no cameras, no grand speeches, only silent gestures, food donations, funded repairs, financial support for families in need. It was his form of redemption, an apology that words could never truly express. In the final scene, Sophia walked through the city streets holding James's hand. The smile on her face revealed the peace of someone finally free to write her own story. In the distance, Edward watched in silence, and Maggie accompanied them with her heart full of hope. The new beginning did not belong only to Sophia, but to everyone whose lives had crossed hers. And so, after following Sophia's intense journey, it's impossible not to ask yourself, how many times have you felt trapped in a life that looked perfect on the outside, but suffocating on the inside? This story reminds us that freedom, choices, and courage are worth far more than any mansion or fortune. If you want to keep following stories full of emotion, reflection, and unexpected twists, make sure to subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and don't forget to leave a comment telling me which city you're watching from. This is just the beginning, and I want you with me in every chapter of this journey.